I don't know if I can tell you too much about Curtis because I was, we were very involved, but it was a long time ago, and I don't remember too much.
Sure. Um, well, first, let me just say there is, of course, a little incongruity in my picking your brain about someone who's almost completely forgotten. I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah,
Uh, but how did you meet?
I don't remember. I know I really don't remember. All I remember is that we were in constant phone conversations about what to do about people with disability, and he was an obnubs what how do you call obnubsman I could never pronounce that word ombuds
Ombudsman.
ob,
Between whom and whom?
between him and anybody who would complain about unfairness to, I mean, especially, accessibility.
Yeah.
And that's why
He
at that time I was very much interested. You probably know more about him than I do.
Well, I met him a few times when I was a kid because my parents were involved in getting the New York City disability rights movement going, which is a big part of why I've been working on putting the story of its
Yeah.
history together. Uh, and as I recall, he was sort of a big, good-looking man, very soft-spoken,
He was
incredibly thoughtful.
soft-spoken, big guy, but of course he was, a quadriplegic, which is, I find, when you get that at a later age, it's much more tragic. It's much more horrible than if you get your disability as a young kid, because as a young kid you get used to it very quickly. But when you're 25, I don't know, I don't remember how old he was when he got this
I
nerve.
believe he was 30.
Yeah, so that's
It,
pretty
it,
dramatic.
It is, and yet I have to say that the way the rest of his life unfolded, I would describe as we've all heard the phrase post traumatic stress, but I would describe it as post traumatic growth. I mean, he went to law school, he
Yeah.
became an advocate, he founded the organization Untapped Resources, he got
That's
married.
that. Oh, you see, I'm beginning to remember. I remember untapped resources. Yes, that's what we were always. And then, of course, now he was married and then he was divorced. Is that what it is?
As I understand it, he was married three times and raised three children, one of them his own. And actually, I mean, I gather that you guys became friends, and
Yeah.
uh, now you're sort of a study in contrasts, right? I mean, you were born in Israel, you became disabled at a young age, you had a big career starting at an early age. Curtis was African American, he was 20 years older before he became disabled. I believe he was a letter carrier. So, very different starting
Oh,
points.
yeah,
What
yeah.
do you think it was that that led to your friendship?
The mutual interest. Mutual interest. He must have been recommended to me by, I would meet a lot of people, or, well, not a lot, but some people who were involved in this problems of attitudinal barriers and physical barriers and so on. And even be, maybe it was Judy Human. I don't, you know who Judy Human is?
Sure.
She's, as a matter of fact, I think I read something that she's getting some sort of an honor these days. I mean,
Yes, she recently published a memoir. She was profiled in a movie called Crip Camp that I was an advisor on, and I
uh,
just heard yesterday it was nominated for an Academy Award,
yeah, it's not.
which is exciting.
Yeah. So that's why, I called him up because there were all sorts of problems, and you mentioned in your letter about the Carnegie Hall situation.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember the Carnegie Hall situation was that he made a big scandal, and people were very upset because he was there was a demonstration and stuff in the back, and I think that he Now I remember, I think he was in, he had this chair that had this lung thing that would help him breathe. Oh, now it's coming back. And he was on the 56th Street side, the back entrance of Carnegie Hall. And it was up the steps. And he couldn't get up the steps. And they couldn't, and they wanted to carry him and they refused. And of course, I mean, it was like that chair must have weighed, what, 300 pounds at least because it had those batteries and stuff.
Right.
So he stood there and he was saying, I'm running out of air because the batteries started it was really, it was a kind of scandal, and it was in the the news. I think there may have been, if I don't if I recollect, some people from the media from not TV, but I think newspaper. And
Interesting. I've checked in the Times. They didn't report on it, but they
it
they were
recorded.
pretty bad on disability issues back then.
I'm
Uh,
sure. I'm sure.
so
So,
I haven't.
so,
I've looked
so
in.
yeah. Go ahead.
I looked in the Daily News. Haven't found anything yet, but I will look more
Yeah, but
more
he was,
pointedly.
they were not happy with him at Carnegie Hall. And then, but Carnegie Hall, it's, I have a very funny story. I went on the board of trustees at Carnegie Hall for specifically to make sure that when they were renovating the hall, it should be accessible. And I did what I could, and I worked with the architect there and so on. But it's still not accessible. I mean, it's accessible to go in, but the entire first year you can't get into the first year because each place in the thing is has a little step, so it's difficult and stuff. And then in the hall itself, you can only sit in specific places that are all the way in the back and so on. But anyway, but at least now there are some elevators that you can go from the front and also from the back. There are elevators,
Hmm.
so you can do that. But to get into the hall, I think there is a way of a roundabout. But of course, the reason, of course, is always, well, this building was built 100 years ago, blah blah
Sure.
blah. Think about it.
Now,
But anyway,
now Curtis said that he couldn't get into one of your concerts, and he
right,
raised a
that was,
ruckus. And the
yeah.
upshot was a wheelchair lift on the Seventh Avenue side. Now, as I recall him in the '60s, he wasn't using breathing assistance. So I'm assuming this was in the '70s, a little bit later.
Yeah, because he was, because he had the breathing. Yeah, he had that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's basically it. That that he loved the. He was not polite. He was, if we need to do something, we've got to do something. And he was never satisfied with what was going on. It was always, oh yeah, but what about that? What about this? And so on. It was
There's
very.
another disability activist, Ed Roberts, who founded an organization that he called the Society of Giraffes, people who stick their necks out.
Very funny.
It's,
Very,
uh,
very funny.
and
But
this is
Curtis,
not, sorry?
yeah, Curtis was that. He was a giraffe. He was definitely a giraffe. And I'm sure, because I mean that's what made him so. I don't want to say successful, but that's what made him relevant. To what was going on, is his tenaciousness, and he did not really care what people thought about him. He wasn't. Sometimes you meet people who they act because they say, well, I want to make sure that everybody likes me, so I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to say that, and so on. He wasn't that. He was like, bulldozer. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and if it's going to cause a scandal like they did at Carnegie, I don't care. I'm trying to accomplish something. I'm trying to make a point, and so on and so forth.
So we're talking today because Curtis was one of the founders of the New York City disability rights movement, and he kind of went his own way. He wasn't really part of the big organizations of the time. He founded his own group, Untapped Resources, um, and my work in the history of this movement has required me to talk and find out about people who are invisible or largely invisible and not very well remembered. Have you been asked about him before?
No, absolutely not.
What you have pulled up from your memory adds to my understanding of him very, very much, uh, since I haven't been able to speak to his children. Um, and so our conversation helps to preserve memory of Curtis for the community and for the public.
Yeah. No, I think he deserves a place because it was definitely, it was, I think it was important. I think maybe some people would disagree with his way of doing it, but that was his way. His way was like, you know,
Um, my father was similar.
well, listen, at that time, I mean, you have to, if people don't listen to you, you've gotta shout.
Right. Well,
Anyway,
thank you very, very much for your time.
my pleasure.
I
Good
can't
luck,
thank.
good luck with your book.
The book is at least a couple of years from completion. I'm sorry to say, the more I work on it, the longer it gets. Uh, but I am working on it steadily. In the meantime, I did recently launch a website called Disability History NYC,
Okay,
and if you get a chance to look at it, I would be thrilled.
I will. Okay.
Thank you very,
I
very
see.
much.
Okay, I'll
Take
talk.
care.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye.